We have three topics focused on today. The first is, did Elon Musk get the CEO of Siemens fired? The second is, the China Model 3s are now coming out, and the quality is actually better than what we're seeing in the United States. So it introduces a competitive question of should vehicles be shipped from China versus the US going forward. The third thing we take a look at today is what looks like the makings of a pretty brutal short squeeze, which would be very profitable for Tesla stock owners. So we look forward to covering this as well. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time on our channel, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. Please note that we tend to do live feeds, and so we'll definitely say hello at the end of the show, but we'll not do so at the beginning to maintain show continuity. And we also want to thank our Patreon supporters as well as our subscribers. Your subscription makes a big difference to the forward progress and success of the channel, and we appreciate your doing so. So we start our show off today with an interesting comment. The current CEO of a company called Siemens, the largest industrial company in Germany and perhaps one of the largest in Europe, reference Elon Musk as a pot-smoking moonbeam. And so I was kind of surprised when I read this piece because I was like, wait a second, this gentleman, Herr Kieser, runs one of the largest companies in the world, and the vitriol in his comments seem rather strange given that he's actually in such a powerful position and could be a change agent quietly without having to make any public comments that are extremely negative about Elon Musk. So if you dig into the story further, what you learn is that there's a gentleman named Herr Busch, who is the deputy CEO of Siemens, and he actually had both had lunch and reviewed a number of discussions about autopilot and transitions to electricity, etc., with the deputy CEO and soon-to-be CEO of Siemens. And after his meetings, with Herr Busch's meetings with Elon Musk, he articulated that Elon Musk was a visionary with whom he looked forward to Siemens doing a lot more business going forward than they currently do. So a week after he made these statements was when the current CEO made comments regarding Tesla being, or Elon Musk being, a pot-smoking moonbeam. And so it was an interesting comment, I thought, because on one hand, yes, Elon Musk admitted he smokes pot, and two, moonbeam evidently is a children's story related to the fact that there are these folks related to a moon traveling young person. And I guess you can't argue with that either, because Elon does like to travel to space and looking at the moon as well. And so it's a dig, but it's kind of an accurate dig, one might say. It was kind of interesting because we deduced that he got fired because when his deputy was referencing, the issues with him smoking, the issues with Elon Musk being a visionary and having all these ways in which Siemens is currently doing business and looking forward to doing business with Elon, I thought it made it quite clear that the long-term relationship with Siemens looks pretty good. It should also be noted that Elon's value proposition of meeting with him was actually driven by the fact that Elon is trying to build a factory in Germany, and it's likely that because of the business relationship Tesla has with Siemens, that could actually influence whether or not the new factory is allowed to happen. And so we're looking forward to see how this all plays out. But for now, the signal is that the outgoing CEO might actually be outgoing partially because of his take on what's going on with Tesla. And the board of the company may not like his position, and therefore he's getting replaced partially for this reason. it's also interesting to note that we've kind of seen similar things going on at other major, in particular automakers in Germany, as there's been an unwillingness to ride with what the future looks like. Folks like the CEO of, for example, Daimler-Benz have chosen to quit rather than deal with what the electric future might mean. So we thought it was kind of interesting. And we also wanted to throw in a note there for Bob Lutz to indicate that instead of Elon going out of business or suffering ills, the opposite is occurring, which is the folks that run some very large companies are seeming to have bigger problems with Elon than vice versa. So Bob Lutz, I don't think you're right about this one. We'll see how it all plays out. The second thing we wanted to dive into that we articulated earlier is the new vehicles have now started to arrive in China, and arrive meaning that there's a very interesting play of words that's going on, which is the vehicles have now begun being assembled in China versus manufactured in China. And so if you read the articles that are going from Bloomberg and other places, right now the suggestion is all the parts are being shipped from the US and simply put together in China, just like what's happening in the plant in the Netherlands that Tesla has. And the answer to that we're saying is not the case. The batteries, just like with the Fremont plant, are being shipped from Nevada, and then you have perhaps the motors coming from that facility as well. But we basically have the rest of the vehicle, in terms of body panels, et cetera, being built in China, and then the other global sort of pieces of the vehicles that are being shipped in either from Japan or Germany and other places is being normally sourced. So we found interesting some of the small little digs that seem to be happening from competing entities as Tesla stretches out. So our thumbnail today is actually going to be an image of the 10-cent reviewer of the Chinese Model 3 that's coming out. I watched, and even in subtitles, I thought it was one of the best reviews of Model 3 that I've ever seen. And the comparison I use is if you go to the factory in Fremont, we actually did a tour with a trained Tesla PR person who took us on a tour with the car, and they just had excellent knowledge about every detail of the vehicle. So I was very impressed by the folks at the 10 cents, thanks to Teslarati. Actually, it was electric that we saw the attached video of the press review of the vehicle. So there are a few things that came out of this. The first is that the build quality in China coming out of the Shanghai factory is, according to the journalists we saw, better than the vehicles coming out of the United States. Now, build quality meaning external panel gaps as well as seals, as well as internal quality of finish is claimed to be actually better. And this was kind of a surprise because there's a long history of sort of Chinese manufacturer being substandard to Europe and America. And it's impressive to see the Tesla factory in Shanghai delivering excellent quality, at least initial quality before we see how it is on the road, from external and internal inspection. Now, there might be other variables playing here. For example, that factory is producing way low numbers relative to its capability as it does test quantities of vehicles heading into full production. So this attention to detail may be impacted by the volume of cars coming out. We actually thought that was really impressive to have vehicles hitting the streets that are showing better quality than what we're seeing from U.S. built vehicles coming out right now. Bit of a shock. We're going to attach a thumbnail so you can take a look at the video. If you own a Tesla or see it, et cetera, you won't be, I don't think there'll be any issue there. The other thing that's happening right now, and the next segment of our show really focuses on what's going on with the stock, which is kind of one of our focal areas for our show. The final thing we wanted to note that's interesting about the Tesla factory is there's something called capex, or the amount of money that's being put into plant and equipment uh, for on the long-term basis. So what's happening is Tesla's capex numbers supposedly have fallen to about from 1.5 billion to about $500 million. And this is kind of interesting because if you think about it, uh, capex for Tesla is falling while the investments in new factories is rising. So Tesla is currently building a battery plant in China. They've already obviously finished the production facility in Shanghai. And so in theory, their actual capex is rising because they're building more factories, but their output of cash is falling. And the question is, why is that? Because it's a big impactor on the stock price to have extra cash around to be used. For example, they just made a $590 million convertible debt payment, and that payment sort of lowers their overall debt ratios, and that improvement is getting them higher bond ratings. So we wanted to bring this up relative to the China miracle for Tesla because it really shows the Chinese commitment to using the China balance sheet to support the success of Tesla. And as this happens more, uh, i.e., more vehicles are being produced without huge capex costs, you're all of a sudden seeing this nice ratio, and this is contributing to things like Tesla is showing a 23% margin on vehicles, much better than the 18% that they had in the previous quarter. And if they can sort of maintain or even add to this as that China plant comes on profitably, these are some of the in the weed statistics that can start influencing the stock price going forward. So we look forward to keeping track of this and updating you on it as it occurs, but very, very impressive. So the next thing that we wanted to review heading into our stock discussion is the fact that there's a sort of an interesting thing that's occurred. We predicted Tesla stock price around this time would be at approximately 350, driven by, generally solid numbers, but not a huge ramp up in stock price relative to what the number was after earnings. So as you recall, the stock price spiked to about 328, and then there was some question mark about whether these numbers were manufactured that were good, and then the stock price sort of petered down into the 315s, and now we're now in the zone with S&P coming in with basically an upgrade of Tesla's debt. We're now starting to see a number of analysts that have had a chance to really look through the numbers come back and say, hey, this is real. This is real, and the bottom line is that we're going to see Tesla with the revenue and profit from China coming in, and other variables influencing positively the company. So several things cited were, number one, the growth in revenue that'll be generated from China. Two, the aforementioned decline in capex as the stability of the Model 3's production starts to occur. Obviously number four, sort of better operations in general, but we've now started to see, Jeffries just came out and raised their price target to $400 for the stock price. There have been others that have expanded that number to indicate that they're targeting a $534 stock price for Tesla. But in general, a lot of positive comments about where the stock price is headed and not a lot of negative ones. And so what we're seeing happen and we expected to occur was as soon as we find out what the real number is for production from China, that number would start to influence the stock of Tesla because those analysts could simply add up how many vehicles are coming out of the factory and then look at adding sort of doing the multiplication to figure out how many vehicles we add, and that way be able to anticipate what the new revenue numbers should be expected from Tesla and China, and therefore how the company's going to do. So we're thrilled to see what's going on in this cycle. And one of our viewers asked the question, well, is this time for the short squeeze? Excellent question. The issue with short squeezes is that what you'll tend to see happen is a very dramatic increase in the stock price, like what happened with earnings, where it went from 250 to about 320, overnight, that's a short squeeze situation. When we're rising incrementally, there are obviously different types of shorts. People that are short very short periods of time, or people that are short over long periods of time. But basically what's happening is that we believe, as we have the approval and beginning of real production from China come on board, that's where we feel you'll see a bump in stock price, and all of a sudden there are a lot of people that are currently short the stock that have to figure out, is this a long trend of the stock rising, destroying our short position, or is this just a temporary rise in the stock price? And so the tsunami of positive news that's coming in from Tesla really suggests that what we're heading into is a pretty heavy movement upward of the stock price, driven by great news like better margins, the increase of revenue from China, the impending arrival of Model Y, all the cash they'll get from the introduction of the truck and the deposits that come in from it. So there's this whole tidal wave of new information, new products that represent a huge upward positive for Tesla. And all of these variables drive the stock price forward and therefore potentially destroy the shorts. So what basically is happening is those shorts that are in the short term, as the stock price pops and doesn't meander back down, they have to start exiting their positions. And we think that we're sort of heading into a tsunami of this occurring. And I believe that the result of this could be a pop up above $400 into the 450 range. If all these numbers come together nicely, including the China shipments, and then we're able to count large numbers of vehicles being produced there, we believe that this sort of confluence of issues could actually be a big time push for Tesla's stock price. So as we shared, lower capex was 23% margin, China revenue, the capex from China being lower. So if the Chinese maintain their posture, we could actually see another Tesla plant being built, and it doesn't affect their capex. But I mean, they may have to spend some money for land. But if we keep seeing how China can bolster Tesla's balance sheet by sort of off-balance sheet financing in this fashion, we think it's a whole wave of how Tesla's does better, etc. One of the things that's sort of coming up that emerged from all this that we were noticing is that if in fact we're getting better build quality from China, it's possible that Tesla will now have to start tracking, what are the repair costs related to the China facilities when they're already less expensive to build as well, and they're being better built. I think it's going to start putting on pressure on Tesla to determine whether the cars will be shipped from China to Europe and other places versus having them made and shipped from the United States. This is especially the case because Tesla is in a position right now where there's so many new products that need to come out that actually need to be stabilized in the production process. It would actually be in the best interest of the company to simply ship out as much as it can out of what should be coming from the United States facilities in order to facilitate better overall operations. So, we look forward to how this is, all going to play out. Now, we did get a couple of questions that were fired across. One of them regarded, what's paint quality looking like coming out of China? Right now, the data we have to work with is the blue vehicles that were put on the road. The journalists were talking more about autopilot function as well as fit and finish, both internal and external to the car, all of which were excellent. And so when it comes to manufacturers and those first test vehicles, I've been around this for about 30 years, and it's hard to tell what the paint quality is, especially because we're not at scale, because the only vehicles that are going to see the light of day are the ones that are perfect. So we believe that quality is actually pretty good, but that's subject to what happens when we have scale volume coming out of the factory from China, so we can tell better what's occurring there. I saw a question that popped through from Craigslist that You can add to the bottom of the show once we end if you choose not to fire it again. But we're sort of in the period right now. If you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, I'm happy to do so, and therefore add it to the live show that we have. One of the requests that was made to us by one of our viewers, I believe Adam, was he asked us to review what was going to happen with Powerwall, and I think this may be our newly added segment every show on what's happening with Tesla Energy. Craigslist asked a question regarding when are we going to see Powerwall 3, and very good question. Right now, as you know, Tesla has been trying to stabilize their Model 3 activities and then roll over into obviously the other vehicles that are being produced and preparing for them. But there is a huge demand right now for Powerwall 2. There's a kind of a mystery going on there. If we go back on the history of Powerwall a little bit, we could talk about the fact that there was a situation where Mercedes actually partnered with a U.S. company to start delivering Powerwalls. And the problem they ran into was that the Mercedes Powerwall was double the price of Tesla's. So even though this was around for a year or two, it was actually canceled. And so we thought that was kind of an interesting circumstance. And the reason, like I said, it was canceled was the Tesla Powerwall 2 was half the price, but at or better performance. And so it didn't make sense to keep it on the market. Now, what the question posed by Craigslist is, what about Powerwall 3? I think that Powerwall 3 is going to get delayed by the fact that they're having shortages of Powerwall 2, especially given all the fire issues that are spread in Tesla's #1 market of California. So the answer is they can barely keep up with demand for Powerwall 2. Powerwall 3 is definitely in development and will come out. But I believe that there's a shortage of batteries if it was 2170s being used, and Tesla has actually started using Samsung and other manufacturers for terrestrial-based, production activities because the weight is not as big a deal. So that's been Tesla's solution of how to get power products done. So it's possible that 3 could come out without affecting how batteries are, being delivered to other products like the Model 3. But we just think that there's so many things happening right now that this Powerwall 3 will be delayed further, and they're barely able to keep up with Powerwall 2 demand. And we actually had a comment come out of California that suggested that Tesla's actually decided to start selling Powerwall 2 at or near cost as a way to address homeowners throughout the Bay Area and other areas of California that are now dealing with blackouts. So, it was an excellent question. We don't have a lot of information on that. We'll do some research and get back to you on it. But it does allow us to sort of reach in and see what's happening in the Tesla energy sector briefly in this fashion, and I think is a good question. So we're at the point in the show now where we usually do our shutdowns. We usually choose a topic and sort of ride from there. We actually introduced a segment last time regarding cell phones. We're looking around at phones as we make our transition. The answer is that one of our viewers is actually a developer and definitely feels like the Pixel is worth it. The thing for us is that there's a nuisance factor for certain products. So when you have to keep changing your charging apparatus, when you have to keep changing all these different things, folks don't go with that. And so we believe this is why Samsung has become such a force when it comes to Android. We did say Pixel is a good phone. There's nothing wrong with it. It gets rapid updates when new come out, and therefore it's safer than phones that aren't updated frequently. But, again, the issue that pops up is Tesla or Google tends to have a 1 to 2 year, maybe 3-year time horizon when they like doing phones, and then they change their mind and they don't do it anymore. So it's really nice to have the infrastructure of long-term support for products that are being we've gotten a few more questions posed there. What I think we're going to do is take those questions and sort of put them offline. That way, uh, we can actually get a lot more input from everyone else as well. So I think what we're going to do is copy paste and ask you to, put those in as end of show questions. Hmm, Interesting. Uh, there was one last thing we wanted to point out, and that is that there was a comment regarding um, our thoughts on SpaceX and Starlink. Um, yeah, there's been notice that there are new satellites that have been put up by SpaceX to help build out the Starlink network, which will allow broadband service from space. And so, with those new elevations of small, so if you don't know, Starlink is a process where Tesla is sending up large numbers of small satellites that will ring the Earth and be able to provide broadband service. It looks like a really good product, and the Bezos company has articulated that they're going to follow suit in doing a similar thing as well. Um, this sort of dovetails into the fact that, we've actually been talking with folks about, for those interested in pre-IPO shares of SpaceX, please send us a note at Tesla Fan Insight, a private note on Facebook, and we can include you in the group that's in discussion. I wanted to give a quick update for those of you who are in that group that we've developed, and that is that at this point we're at about 10 people and sort of figuring out what next steps are. What the stage we're at right now is that we actually need to produce perhaps a 10 to 20 hour long put together report for all those participants in order to note sort of where SpaceX is currently and what their prospects are future, as well as when the IPO might occur. And that way you can make a decision if you want to join the group or not based on that research. So, we're sort of at a need to follow up with those folks, and we'll, give you some information on that more directly, particularly if you provide your email address. Uh, that we can send you a note on what's going on and let you make the decision from there. We really are in the zone where you don't want to do stuff, you want to do it high quality. And so in this case, that means, some quality research, a nice report written up and shipped out because, those shares are pretty expensive and you want to execute each detail carefully and well. But in terms of the product, it's clear that Starlink is a valid entity and has a lot of upside potential in providing broadband services competitively. And obviously, Elon's ability to get the satellites up is part of the competitive advantage that Tesla represent, or SpaceX represents / Elon Musk. Obviously, separate companies. And so we look forward to updates on that for those of you who are interested. At any rate, we wanted to thank you for taking time out to join us today. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Remember, 25 leg lifts per leg so you don't have issues with your knees, as well as I wanted to encourage you to don't go to bed within 2 hours of eating, preferably 4 to let the food digest. Less, if not no, acid reflux issues. In German, we say Tschüss, mach's gut. In French, au revoir. Lehitrot. In Hebrew, Choda Hafez. Farsi, Hejdu in Swedish. Ni hao ma, which means hello in Chinese. And Zdravstvuyte in Russian. That is hello, I know that, but just sounds cool. It's a lot better than Das Vidanya. In Jamaica, we say enough respect, walk good. Want to thank Craigslist, our folks from all over the world at FSLO. We appreciate your doing so. Look forward to our next conversation, and note that your questions definitely influence show topics, etc. And constructive criticism inputs are always appreciated. We are working on our lights, sounds, etc. And we'd appreciate any support of Patreon to support better implementation of all the above. Thanks once again for joining us. Have a great day. Bye for now, and look forward to our next conversation.